The air inside the briefing room aboard the USS Lewis B. Puller carried the weight of salt, steel, and silence. Screens pulsed with ISR data, casting cold light across a line of Tier 1 operators who didn't move, only watched. Master Chief Victoria Reed stood at parade rest, unshaken, precise. The kind of presence forged where mistakes don't get corrected, they get buried. At the head of the room, Commander Anthony Armstrong scrolled through her record without urgency. Then, he stopped. "I requested a Tier 1 assault lead," he said, voice flat. "Not a political placement." No one reacted, but no one missed it. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "You'll take Overwatch," he added. "You observe, you do not lead." A lesser operator would have answered. Victoria didn't. Her eyes stayed fixed, just above his. Because something in the mission briefing didn't align. And in her world, when command starts rewriting roles, it usually means the outcome was decided before the mission ever began.
The humidity of the Persian Gulf pressed against the steel bulkheads of the USS Lewis B. Puller, saturating the air inside the briefing room with a thin, metallic dampness. Condensation traced slow lines along exposed piping overhead. The low-frequency vibration of the ship's engines carried through the deck plates, subtle but constant, like a pulse beneath the surface. Master Chief Victoria Reed stood at parade rest, boots aligned with exacting precision on the non-skid floor. Her hands were clasped behind her back, fingers interlocked, tendons in her wrists faintly visible beneath weathered skin. Her gaze remained fixed just above Commander Anthony Armstrong's head, deliberate, disciplined, impersonal. At 43, her presence carried the accumulated weight of 2 decades in Tier 1 operations. Fine lines cut across the corners of her eyes, not from age alone, but from sustained exposure salt, wind, strain, and the long-term compression of high-risk decision cycles. Her shoulders stayed squared, spine neutral, chin level. No shift in balance, no wasted motion. Armstrong sat at the head of the briefing table, a ruggedized tablet angled in his hands. He scrolled without urgency, the faint reflection of data flickering across his eyes. He did not acknowledge her immediately. The silence stretched, deliberate, controlled. Around the room, operators from Team 3 remained still. Though not motionless, one adjusted his stance by a fraction. Another rolled tension through his jaw, a quiet exhale passing through his nose. The commander's thumb paused against the screen. A small muscle along his cheek tightened, then released. "I requested a Tier 1 assault lead," he said at last, his voice even, stripped of inflection. His eyes lifted, settling on her without warmth. "Instead, I got a political asset." No one moved. The statement hung in the air, unchallenged. A faint shift of fabric came from the far side of the room as one operator adjusted the sling of his rifle. Another blinked, slower than normal, gaze dropping momentarily before returning forward. Armstrong rose from his seat. The chair legs scraped lightly against the deck, the sound brief but sharp against the enclosed space. He stepped forward, closing the distance with measured precision until he stood within her personal space, close enough that the faint scent of pressed fabric and recycled air displaced the room's humidity. Victoria did not react. Her breathing remained controlled. 4-count exhale, 4-count exhale, barely perceptible in the rise of her chest. "You'll take secondary Overwatch," Armstrong continued. His tone did not rise, did not harden. It remained steady, administrative. "Rib position, you observe a fractional pause. You do not lead." A flicker passed through the room, small, contained. One operator's fingers tightened briefly around the edge of the table before releasing. Another shifted his weight from heel to toe, the movement subtle enough to avoid drawing direct attention. Armstrong turned slightly, angling his body toward a junior officer positioned along the far wall. The officer straightened instinctively, shoulders pulling back, chin lifting a few millimeters too high. "You'll assume primary assault," Armstrong said, already moving past the moment. "You have point on insertion." The reassignment landed without ceremony. No discussion. No acknowledgement of experience differential. The room absorbed it in silence. Victoria's eyes did not track the exchange. They remained fixed, unwavering, her expression neutral to the point of absence. Only a faint tightening along her jawline suggested internal registration, a controlled contraction that disappeared as quickly as it formed. The commander stepped back, returning to the head of the table. He placed the tablet down with controlled precision, aligning it parallel to the table's edge. His fingers lingered for a fraction of a second before withdrawing. No one spoke. The operational hierarchy had been altered in real time, without justification, without consultation. Every operator in the room understood the implications. No one voiced them. Victoria maintained her posture, unmoving. But within the silence, the shift was absolute. He had just sidelined the most qualified operator present. The prep bay carried the sterile hum of staged readiness. Equipment racks lined the bulkheads in symmetrical rows, each item secured, labeled, accounted for. Overhead lighting cast a hard, even wash across the space, reflecting off anodized metal and matte black weapon systems. The air smelled faintly of lubricant, polymer, and recycled ventilation. Master Chief Victoria Reed stood over a ruggedized display terminal, its surface populated with layered ISR feeds, thermal imaging, signal overlays, structural schematics of the target platform. Her fingers moved with controlled precision across the interface, isolating data channels, adjusting gain, filtering noise. The motion was economical, practiced to the point of muscle memory. Her eyes tracked the thermal layer. Heat signatures pulsed across the oil platform in irregular intervals. Not the staggered organic drift of human sentries shifting weight, pausing, resuming patrol. These were discrete blooms, appearing, fading, reappearing on fixed vectors, timed, repeating. Her jaws set slightly, a near imperceptible contraction at the hinge. She overlaid the pattern against known guard rotation models. The alignment failed. No correlation with standard perimeter security behavior. No clustering near access points. No random deviation. The spacing was too consistent, the timing too clean. Victoria adjusted the temporal scale, compressing several minutes of data into a tighter sequence. The heat blooms resolved into a structured cadence cycling in a sequence that suggested load distribution rather than human presence. Power routing. Activation phases. Her breathing slowed, controlled as her focus narrowed. Automated systems. Or assisted targeting. She stepped back from the terminal, the soles of her boots making a muted contact against the deck. For a fraction of a second, her gaze remained on the display, committing the pattern to memory. Then she turned. The command station sat at the far end of the bay, partially enclosed, its primary screen dark reflective enough to mirror movement in the room. Commander Anthony Armstrong stood before it, posture straight, one hand adjusting the line of his collar. His reflection stared back at him, expression composed, untouched by the activity behind him. Victoria approached without haste. Each step was measured, aligned. "Commander," she said, voice level, carrying just enough to reach him without force. "This isn't a conventional garrison." Armstrong did not turn. His fingers smoothed the fabric at his throat, then stilled. Victoria continued, her tone unchanged. "Thermal patterns indicate structured cycling, not personnel movement. It looks like an integrated defense grid, possibly remote-operated or assisted targeting." A brief pause. The faint hum of the ship filled the gap. "If we insert without adjustment," she added, "we're walking into a pre-configured kill box." Armstrong's head tilted by a fraction, but his eyes remained on the dark screen. He studied his own reflection as he responded. "This mission has already been cleared through my authority," he said. His voice remained even, administrative, stripped of any visible strain. "You are not here to interpret intelligence, Master Chief." His hand dropped from his collar, settling at his side. "You are here to execute." Silence followed. The distance between them held unbroken. Victoria's expression did not shift. Only a subtle tightening at the corner of her eyes suggested internal recalibration data acknowledged, options narrowing. A beat passed. Armstrong's gaze remained fixed on his reflection. "Absolute obedience," he said. "Each word placed with deliberate spacing isn't optional." The statement settled into the space without echo. No raised voice, no emphasis beyond precision. Victoria held his position in her line of sight, posture unchanged. Her hands remained steady at her sides, fingers relaxed but not loose. The rhythm of her breathing stayed controlled, contained within the boundaries of discipline. Behind her, the ISR display continued its silent cycle, feet blooming, fading, returning in perfect, mechanical intervals. The pattern did not change. The MH-60 insertion began clean. Rotor wash flattened the surface of the water into dark, shifting patterns as the aircraft held a stable hover above the platform. The fast rope lines dropped in synchronized sequence, striking the metal deck with controlled slack. One by one, the assault element descended, boots locking, hands braking, bodies aligning as they hit the surface and cleared the landing zone with practiced efficiency. No hesitation, no wasted motion. For a fraction of time, the operation held its shape. Then the platform came alive. High-intensity floodlights ignited without warning, banks of industrial illumination flaring across the structure in a coordinated surge. The sudden luminance saturated the environment, washing over the deck in a blinding white that cut through night vision amplification with surgical precision. Through optics, the effect was immediate overexposure, bloom, loss of contrast. On the rope, one operator's descent stuttered for a fraction of a second, grip tightening instinctively before release resumed. On deck, silhouettes fractured into glare. Seconds later, the first burst of machine gun fire tore across the platform. Not erratic, not suppressive in the conventional sense, controlled. Rounds impacted along calculated lanes, stitching across approach vectors and cover points with deliberate spacing. Concealed emplacements revealed themselves only through muzzle flash brief, contained repositioning between bursts. The fire came in layers, overlapping arcs that denied movement rather than reacting to it. Disciplined, adaptive. The assault element attempted to reorient one operator, pivoted toward partial cover, another dropped to a knee, weapon indexing toward a flash that had already disappeared. Communication gestures shortened, compressed into immediate survival actions. On the RHIB 500 yards out, Master Chief Victoria Reed remained locked behind thermal optics. The boat's engine idled low beneath her, a steady vibration against the hull. Her elbows were braced, minimizing drift as she tracked heat signatures across the platform. Through the thermal layer, the battlefield resolved differently. Movement patterns detached from the chaos visible to the naked eye. Heat signatures shifted in deliberate vectors, short displacements, angular repositioning, maintaining distance, and crossfire integrity. No clustering, no break in spacing. Her focus narrowed. Enemy elements were not reacting, they were executing. The repositioning mirrored Western small unit doctrine-bounding movement, sector coverage, interlocking fields of fire. Each shift created pressure, forced exposure, closed escape corridors. This wasn't irregular militia behavior. This was trained coordination. Her jaw tightened, a brief compression before release. She keyed her comms. Overwatch to command, she transmitted, voice level, controlled. Team is pinned. Recommend immediate extract window. The channel held. For a moment, only static and distant rotor noise filled the space. On the platform, muzzle flashes continued in measured intervals, each burst correcting, adjusting, refining pressure on the assault element. Victoria did not move. Her breathing remained steady, but her grip on the optics firmed, tendons along her hand standing out beneath the skin. A response came. Armstrong's voice, calm, detached, unaffected by the tempo unfolding across the water. Negative. A fractional pause. Assault element continues. They push through. The transmission ended without modulation. Victoria's eyes remained fixed on the thermal display. A subtle shift occurred, barely visible, confined to the muscles around her gaze. The data aligned too cleanly. The timing, the illumination, the fire discipline. No degradation, no uncertainty. Only execution. Her expression did not change. But the conclusion settled with precision. This wasn't command friction, not delay, not miscalculation. It was alignment. This wasn't stubborn command. This was intentional exposure. She made the decision before the thought fully formed. Overwatch breaking hold. Moving to assist. Victoria's voice remained level as it moved across the COM channel, stripped of hesitation. The transmission ended clean. No acknowledgement followed. No correction, no permission. Her hand closed around the throttle. The ribs surged forward, engine pitch rising as the bow cut through the waterline. Spray kicked outward in tight arcs, catching stray light from the platform above. She adjusted her vector, angling toward the structural pylons that anchored the platform into the seabed. Incoming fire found the water behind her within seconds. Rounds struck in rapid succession, stitching across the surface sharp, concussive impacts that sent narrow plumes upward. The pattern tracked her wake, correcting incrementally. She shifted course by degrees, using the pylons as intermittent cover, forcing line-of-sight breaks between bursts. Her posture stayed forward, centered. Grip steady, eyes locked on the approach. Distance collapsed. She cut speed late, letting momentum carry the rib into the shadow of the structure. The ladder came into view, steel rungs bolted into the vertical support, slick with condensation and salt. She rose in one motion, boots striking the lower rung with controlled force. Her ascent was immediate. Hands moved in sequence grip, pull, step body close to the ladder to minimize exposure. The sound of gunfire above compressed into sharp, contained bursts. Metallic impacts echoed through the framework, each one reverberating down the structure. Halfway up, a round struck somewhere above, and to her right fragmentation rattled against steel. A brief scatter of particles that dissipated as quickly as it formed. She did not slow. She cleared the top edge and transitioned onto the deck in a single movement, weapon coming up as her boots made contact. The environment resolved in fragments. Light still flooded the platform in harsh, overexposed bands. Muzzle flashes cut through the glare in brief, directional bursts. Movement existed in angles, partial silhouettes, shifting positions, interrupted lines of sight. The violence was contained, directed, surgical. Near the center line of the deck, the junior officer lay supine, body angled awkwardly against the metal grating. One leg was extended, the other partially flexed. Blood had pooled beneath him, dark and spreading, pulsing in diminishing intervals from a wound high along the thigh. Femoral. Victoria closed the distance without breaking stride. She dropped to a knee beside him, one hand already reaching for her kit. Her fingers worked with exacting speed, tourniquet-free, looped, positioned proximal to the wound. The officer's hand twitched once, fingers curling inward before falling slack again. His breathing came shallow, irregular. She tightened the tourniquet. The material bit down with controlled force. She twisted until resistance peaked, then locked it in place. The bleeding slowed, then reduced to a seep. No verbal exchange, No wasted motion. Her focus shifted immediately. The ruggedized tablet lay secured against the officer's vest, its interface still active, data streaming across a dimmed display. She pulled it free, her thumb stabilizing the edge as she brought it into view. The device remained linked to the mission architecture. Signal indicators held steady, no interruption, no degradation at the surface level. She accessed the network layer. Her fingers moved across the interface, navigating through encrypted channels, filtering active nodes. Data scrolled in tight sequences, routing paths, signal strengths, handshake protocols. Then something surfaced, a localized relay. The signal origin sat within the platform's structure, type, contained, distinct from external communication paths. Its encryption signature differed from hostile patterns. No irregular packet fragmentation. No aggressive masking. Structured, recognizable. Her eyes narrowed slightly, tracking the data as it refreshed, encrypted, but not adversarial, internal. Victoria stabilized the tablet against her forearm, angling the screen to cut glare from the floodlights still burning across the deck. Her thumb moved along the interface, isolating the relay node she had identified. The signal held steady, low latency, minimal packet loss, routed through a localized architecture embedded within the platform itself. Not improvised, not external, deliberate. She accessed the CUM's routing layer, tracing the relay's path through nested protocols. Encryption barriers surfaced immediately, multi-layered, structured, designed to resist brute force intrusion. Her jaw tightened slightly, a controlled compression as her fingers adjusted input parameters. She didn't force entry. She rerouted. A backdoor existed, not obvious, not exposed, but present in the handshake sequence between internal nodes. A maintenance pathway, buried within standard routing logic. She redirected through it, fragmenting her access into smaller queries, each one masked within legitimate signal traffic. The system hesitated, then opened. Data populated in compressed streams, authorization logs, command hierarchies, operational flags. Her eyes tracked the flow, isolating key elements as they surfaced. Command overrides, layered above standard mission authority, embedded with priority access that bypassed conventional chain-of-command verification. The identifiers linked upward, terminating in a single authorization source, Armstrong. Her breathing remained steady, but her grip on the tablet firmed, tendons along her hands standing out as she scrolled. Additional entries surfaced, pre-authorized strike windows, time-stamped, aligned not with mission progression but with projected insertion phases. The sequencing was exact, calculated against the assault element's expected position on the platform. She shifted to the extraction layer. Coordinates displayed across the grid designated LG, marked with precision. She cross-referenced them against the strike windows. The alignment held. Her eyes narrowed by a fraction. The coordinates weren't extraction points. They were target designators. A subtle shift passed through her posture, barely perceptible, contained within the tightening of her shoulders. This was never configured as a capture operation. The architecture, the timing, the overrides, each element aligned toward a different outcome. Sanitization. She accessed the mission profile associated with the designated HVT. Data fragments filled the screen identity markers, prior affiliations, contractual links. The network traced outward, connecting through private channels, shell structures, operational records tied to external entities. Then back. The chain looped into prior commands. Armstrong's. Her expression remained controlled, but a faint contraction appeared at the corner of her eye, gone as quickly as it formed. The assault element had been inserted into a closed system, no extraction, no deviation from the predefined sequence. Expendable. A shift in her peripheral vision broke the pattern. Movement. She released the tablet with one hand, pivoting in a single, fluid motion. Her weapon came up, aligning without overshoot. The target resolved within the fraction of a second it took to stabilize her sight picture. She fired once. The suppressed shot cut through the ambient noise as a contained mechanical crack. The round struck center mass. The figure collapsed immediately, momentum dropping straight down against the deck. No return fire, no secondary movement. Victoria held her aim for a beat longer, confirming the absence of further threat. Then she advanced, closing the distance with controlled steps. She reached the body and lowered her weapon slightly, maintaining readiness as she crouched. Her free hand turned the figure onto his back. No tribal identifiers, no irregular insignia. The uniform was structured, equipment fitted with precision. Nothing improvised, nothing mismatched. No militia. Her gaze shifted to the forearm. Fabric had pulled back during the fall, exposing skin marked with a darkened insignia. A trident modified, edges altered. The original form obscured under black overlay. Not standard issue, but derivative. Close enough. Her eyes held on it for a fraction of a second longer, processing the implication without visible reaction. Not seal, but aligned in origin, training, or intent. Contracted professionals. The first strike hit early. There was no audible warning, no incoming call over the net. The impact arrived as a sudden compression of force and overpressure wave that struck the upper structure of the platform with precise, contained violence. Steel screamed as the munition penetrated and detonated, the blast propagating through beams and deck plates in a rapid, concussive chain. Too early. Victoria's head snapped toward the sound a fraction of a second before the shockwave reached her. The force lifted her off balance and drove her laterally into a bulkhead. Her shoulder took the initial impact hard, unbuffered, followed by her ribs as her body absorbed the remainder of the kinetic transfer. Pain registered instantly, sharp, localized, expanding. Her breath caught mid-cycle, diaphragm locking for a fraction of a second before reflex forced air back into her lungs. She pushed off the bulkhead, boots scraping against the deck as she re-established footing. One hand came up instinctively, pressing against her side-testing structure, stability. No immediate loss of function. The platform shuddered beneath her. Secondary vibrations rippled through the structure metal under stress, load redistribution traveling through the framework. Overhead, fragments of debris struck the deck in uneven intervals, scattering across the surface in sharp, metallic impacts. Her jaw tightened as she forced her breathing back into rhythm. Controlled. Contained. Comes crackled to life. Static fractured the channel for a brief moment before resolving into a voice she recognized immediately. Armstrong, all stations, he began. Tone steady, measured, no elevation, no strain. We've lost contact with the assault team. Victoria's eyes lifted slightly, unfocused for a fraction of a second as she listened. Preliminary assessment indicates operational failure at the tactical level. His cadence remained consistent, each word spaced, deliberate, structured for clarity rather than urgency. In the background, faint distortion suggested he was transmitting through a controlled environment, insulated from the chaos unfolding on the platform. Victoria's lips parted slightly as she drew a deeper breath. The taste of iron surfaced at the back of her throat, subtle, metallic. She swallowed once, slow, controlled, clearing it without breaking focus. He was already forming the report, likely due to breakdown in perimeter control. The statement settled into the channel without resistance. No interruption, no counter. Victoria's hand lowered from her side, fingers flexing once before stilling. Her grip tightened briefly around the tablet she still held, knuckles paling beneath the surface before releasing back to neutral. Her gaze shifted across the deck light still burning in harsh bands, shadows moving in fractured intervals between structural elements. The environment continued to degrade in controlled increments, each phase aligning with the data she had already seen. Strike windows. Pre-authorized. The timing matched. Her breathing slowed again, deeper this time, expanding against the ache in her ribs. She did not vocalize, did not transmit. Armstrong's voice continued to occupy the channel, filling the operational vacuum with structured explanation, controlled language, managed tone, each phrase positioned to establish sequence, to define cause, to assign. Victoria's eyes narrowed by a fraction, the muscles at the edges tightening, holding. This wasn't reactive command. The sequence had been established before insertion. The strike, the delay, the framing of failure, each element aligned within a predefined structure. Nothing in his tone suggested deviation, surprise, or recalibration, only execution. She shifted her weight slightly, testing her balance again. The pain in her shoulder flared and settled, contained within manageable limits. Functional, her jaw set. He wasn't just removing variables from the field, he was closing the loop. The assault element, the platform, the strike window, each one a controlled component within the same operational design. And now, through the comms channel, he was defining the outcome. Victoria exhaled slowly through her nose, steadying the rhythm of her breath as the realization settled without visible reaction. He wasn't just eliminating witnesses, he was assigning blame. Victoria held the tablet close to her body, angling it to shield the display from the glare and drifting debris. The platform continued to absorb structural stress, metal flexing in low, sustained groans beneath intermittent impacts. Light flickered across the deck as power cycled unevenly through damaged systems. She didn't reach for her primary comms. Standard channels were compromised. Command traffic flowed through Armstrong's authority, every transmission subject to routing, filtering, control. There was no path there that didn't terminate with him. Her jaw tightened slightly as she made the shift. She went dark. With a controlled movement, she accessed the comms kit integrated into her loadout, fingers moving across familiar contours until they found the secondary transmitter. Compact, shielded, designed for contingency, used the visibility, low signature. She linked it to the tablet. The captured relay still held within the system architecture, its signal stable despite the degradation around her. She rerouted through it again, isolating a narrow band channel-tight frequency, minimal exposure. The handshake sequence took longer this time, interference creeping into the margins as the platform systems destabilized. Her breathing slowed as she monitored the connection. Then it held. The channel extended outward, bypassing the operational net entirely, threading into naval counterintelligence, monitoring nodes systems that existed beyond immediate mission oversight, insulated from field command manipulation. Not fast. Packet transfer rates lagged, constrained by bandwidth limitations and signal integrity. Data queued in compressed fragments, each transmission requiring confirmation before the next could initiate. Not stable. The connection flickered under strain, latency spikes interrupting flow, forcing retrieves. Each interruption risked exposure, risked loss, but it was enough. Victoria initiated the upload. Files moved in segmented bursts, small, discrete packets designed to survive interruption. Her fingers adjusted prioritization in real time, selecting critical data first, structuring the sequence for maximum retention if the link collapsed. Audio logs, compressed, tagged, transmitted. Authorization chains, layered command structures override sequences sent in fragments, each piece locking into the next. Financial routing. Shell pathways branching through offshore accounts, identifiers embedded within transactional metadata. She flagged them, pushed them through the channel in compressed strings. Around her, the platform continued to degrade. Time fractured into movement. She relocated between transmissions, shifting from one section of cover to another, bulkheads, structural supports, any geometry that disrupted line of sight. Her steps remained controlled, measured despite the instability underfoot. Each movement ended in stillness, her posture compressing into the smallest viable profile. At one position, she paused long enough to press her hand briefly against her side. The earlier impact had deepened, pain radiating along her ribs, sharp on inhale, dull on exhale. Her fingers tightened once, then released as she forced her breathing back into rhythm. Functional, she resumed. Hours passed without measure. Lights shifted across the platform as systems failed and rebooted in irregular cycles. The air thickened with particulate, residue, the faint metallic tong of damaged infrastructure. Her uniform bore the accumulation, darkened patches, fine debris clinging to fabric. Still, the transmission continued, uploading, fragments at a time. Her focus narrowed to the process: select, compress, send, confirm, repeat. The final file sat within the queue longer than the others. She opened it once more before transmission, eyes scanning the waveform, confirming integrity. The audio marker remained intact, timestamp aligned with the strike sequence. Armstrong's voice, clear, unambiguous, authorizing the strike window. The timestamp preceded insertion, before the assault element had even made contact. Victoria's thumb hovered over the transmit command for a fraction of a second. A subtle tightening at the corner of her eye, gone as quickly as it formed. Then she sent it. The data packet moved through the narrowband channel, delayed, interrupted, then resumed. The confirmation signal took longer to return. When it did, it held. The file had cleared. Victoria lowered the tablet slightly, her grip easing by a fraction without releasing control. Her breathing remained steady, controlled within the confines of discipline. The network beyond the platform now carried the record, unfiltered, uncontrolled. 10 days later, the briefing room inside the Pentagon was sealed, acoustically dampened. Its walls layered with classified infrastructure designed to contain both data and consequence. Overhead lighting cast a uniform, neutral tone across the space, no shadows deep enough to conceal, no glare strong enough to distract. A large display dominated the far wall, its surface active with operational summaries and sanitized timelines. Commander Anthony Armstrong stood at the center line of the room, positioned with exact alignment to both the screen and the senior leadership seated before him. His uniform was immaculate, creases sharp, insignia perfectly set. His posture remained upright, shoulders squared, chin level. One hand rested lightly against the edge of the briefing console, fingers relaxed, controlled. He did not shift his weight. "Operation Nightfall represents a tragic but instructive failure," he said. His voice carried evenly across the room, calibrated for clarity rather than force. Each word landed with deliberate spacing, unhurried, unstrained. On the display behind him, mission phases scrolled in structured sequence timestamps, insertion points, projected objectives. The data had been reduced to clean lines and controlled language, stripped of friction. Breakdown occurred at the execution level. Armstrong continued. A subtle pause followed. He allowed the silence to settle, his gaze moving across the room with measured precision. No one interrupted. No immediate challenge surfaced. The air remained still, contained within the boundaries of protocol. His jaw shifted slightly, a controlled adjustment before he resumed. Master Chief Reedwile experienced demonstrated hesitation under. The screen behind him flickered. The interruption was brief at first, a distortion across the lower quadrant, a momentary loss of signal coherence. Armstrong's eyes moved toward it without turning his head fully, a fractional deviation in focus. The muscle along his cheek tightened, then released. The display cut black. For a fraction of a second, the room held in suspension. The absence of data drew focus more sharply than its presence. Armstrong's hand remained on the console, fingers now pressing slightly into the surface, tension contained but present. Then the feed reestablished. Not the operational summary, A new image resolved across the screen, grainier, narrower in scope, framed by the constraints of a secondary capture device. A hospital room. The lighting shifted immediately, softer, uneven, carrying the muted tones of clinical space. Medical equipment sat partially within frame, monitoring lines, structural outlines, sterile surfaces reflecting low-intensity light. The environment contrasted sharply with the controlled precision of the briefing room. Armstrong's posture did not break, but his gaze fixed. The transition was complete. The narrative had shifted beyond his control. Victoria Reed sat upright in the hospital bed, her back supported at a controlled incline. A rigid brace stabilized her shoulder, the structure visible beneath the fabric of her issued medical garment. The overhead lighting cast a pale tone across her face, flattening color, emphasizing the drawn edges along her cheekbones. A faint discoloration traced along her jawline, partially obscured, consistent with recent trauma. Her posture remained deliberate, no slack in her spine, no visible concession to fatigue. Her eyes held forward, fixed with a steadiness that did not waver. Behind her, 2 NCIS agents stood at measured distance, physicians slightly apart, shoulders squared, hands settled near their waists. Their presence was quiet, contained within professional stillness. Neither spoke. Neither moved beyond the minimal adjustments of breath. On the screen in the Pentagon briefing room, the image held. Victoria's gaze aligned directly through the feed, as if the distance between locations had been removed. "Commander," she said. Her voice carried evenly, controlled, without elevation. It cut through the room's audio system with precise clarity, free of distortion. "You said obedience was the foundation." The statement settled without emphasis, its weight carried in the absence of inflection. She did not shift her position as she spoke. Only a slight tightening at the edge of her eyes suggested the effort required to maintain composure against underlying strain. In the briefing room, Armstrong remained still. His hand rested against the console, fingers now held in a firmer set, tendons subtly defined beneath the skin. His gaze remained locked on the screen, expression contained. A pause followed. Victoria's breathing remained measured, controlled intake, controlled release, each cycle contained within a narrow range of motion to avoid stress on the brace. She lifted a small remote from beside her. The movement was deliberate, no excess motion. Her fingers closed around it with precise control, thumbs settling over the activation surface. "But you forgot something." The words were delivered without change in tone. She engaged the device. The screen shifted. Data replaced the hospital feed in rapid sequence structured overlays cascading downward in organized columns. Financial records populated first transactional pathways branching across multiple jurisdictions. Identifiers linking accounts through layered intermediaries. Bank transfers. Amounts. Timestamps. Routing codes. They moved in synchronized alignment, each entry reinforcing the next. The sequence advanced. Corporate registries appeared, shell structures nested within one another, ownership obscured through legal partitioning. Names surfaced, dissolved into holding entities, reappeared within secondary frameworks, shell corporations. The display continued without pause. Signal routing logs replaced the financial data network pathways mapped across nodes. Transmission points identified with precision. The localized relay from the platform appeared within the structure, its origin point fixed, its connections branching outward. Signal routing logs. The room remained silent. No interruption, no attempt to regain control of the feed. Then, the data cleared. Audio playback engaged. A waveform appeared briefly, then flattened as the system prioritized output. Armstrong's voice filled the room. Strike window confirmed. The tone matched his own, measured, controlled, devoid of urgency. Assets are expendable. The recording ended clean. No distortion, no ambiguity. Silence followed. Not immediate, but absolute once it settled. In the briefing room, no one spoke. The absence of sound carried weight, compressing the space between individuals. Eyes shifted, not abruptly, but in contained movements toward Armstrong toward the screen, then back again. Armstrong did not move. His posture remained aligned, but a subtle change registered, his jaw set tighter, the line along his cheek more pronounced. His hand eased off the console by a fraction, fingers no longer pressing into the surface. On the screen, Victoria remained still, her gaze unchanged, her posture intact within the constraints of the brace. Every line of data had been placed, every sequence completed, every eye in the room had turned. Commander Anthony Armstrong did not reach for a weapon. He did not adjust his stance, did not attempt to interrupt, did not speak. He remained where he stood, centerline, aligned with the console. Shoulders squared in a posture that had been constructed for command presence. But the structure no longer carried weight. The authority that had defined it minutes earlier had dissipated without visible transition, leaving the form intact and the function removed. For the first time, the room did not orient around him. The silence that followed the audio playback settled into something heavier, no longer procedural, no longer anticipatory. It held. Armstrong's gaze remained forward, fixed on the display. A faint contraction appeared at the edge of his right eye small, involuntary, gone as quickly as it surfaced. His jaw tightened, then stabilized, the muscle along the line holding under restraint. He did not move. Behind him, the doors opened. The sound was controlled hydraulic, measured, but it cut through the stillness with precision. Heads turned in contained motion, not abrupt, not exaggerated. Attention shifted as a unit. Naval security entered first, posture rigid, steps synchronized. NCIS followed close behind, their movement less rigid but equally deliberate. They crossed the threshold without hesitation, advancing to a position that closed distance without crowding the space. No one issued a command to halt them. No one objected. One of the NCIS agents stepped forward, stopping within clear speaking distance. His expression remained neutral, eyes steady, hands visible and controlled at his sides. "Commander Anthony Armstrong," he said. The tone was flat, procedural, free of inflection. "You are being detained pending investigation for unauthorized operations, abuse of command authority, and conspiracy resulting in loss of personnel." The words were delivered in sequence, each charge placed with formal clarity. No emphasis, no deviation from protocol. Armstrong's posture did not break, but something in the alignment shifted, subtle, internal. His shoulders remained squared, yet the tension that had once reinforced the position no longer carried the same structure. His hand, previously resting near the console, lowered by a fraction, fingers relaxing from their controlled set. He did not respond. The weight of the statement settled without resistance. No raised voices, no visible escalation. Not dramatic, not loud, final. On the screen, Victoria Reed remained in frame. She watched from the hospital bed, her posture unchanged, the brace holding her shoulder in fixed alignment. The clinical lighting flattened the scene around her, isolating her presence against the muted geometry of the room. Her eyes stayed on Armstrong. No shift, no visible reaction beyond the sustained focus. There was no release in her expression, no visible satisfaction, no trace of anger. The lines of her face remained composed, controlled within the same discipline that had carried her through the platform, through the transmission, through the reconstruction of events. Her breathing remained measured, steady. The process had reached its conclusion. The operation, as it had been defined in the briefing, no longer existed in the form it had been presented. The platform, the insertion, the designated objective, all of it had been part of a constructed sequence designed to produce a specific outcome. That structure had been exposed. What remained was the underlying record. The mission had not been the platform. It had not been the target. It had been the truth embedded beneath both, buried within command overrides, encoded in routing logs, preserved in audio that had not been intended to survive beyond execution. Victoria's gaze held as Armstrong stood in place, the room no longer responding to him. This time, the sequence had not completed as designed. The record had moved beyond containment, and it endured. If you want to follow more stories built with this level of precision, discipline, and realism, consider subscribing to the channel.